Okay, so you can hear me okay. If I get too loud, you can raise your hand. I don't really like to stay around the podium or anything like that. This is a beautiful crowd. Do we have any Trump supporters? Exactly, and you'll learn why I became such a huge, I don't know if there's any other people that support President Trump as much as I do. I tweet about him all day long. I troll Hillary all day long. Yeah, you do. On April the 25th, 1978, I was a new business owner. I owned a nursing home. I was a registered nurse. I was a mother. I participated in so many organizations in Van Buren, and that was my hometown. But on that day, I became something else. Bill Clinton changed my life forever that day. I became a rape victim of Bill Clinton. And you say, how in the world did that happen? Back in March of 1978, like I said, I was a nurse. I had my own nursing home. I also saw this man on TV. His name was Bill Clinton, and he was the Attorney General, and he was running for governor of my state. And so many people thought that he was just a godsend to Arkansas. We thought he was tremendous. And some of my friends said, hey, we're going down to volunteer for his campaign. Do you want to go? Lord, I already had so much to do, raising a 9-year-old and running my own business. But I thought, that'd be fun. I'd enjoy that. So that's what I did. So for about 3 weeks, I would pick up my son after school, and we would go around to people's homes and see if we could put up yard signs and hand out bumper stickers and do things like that. It was the most thrilling time of my little 9-year-old son's life, because he got to hammer the sign in the ground. He thought that, and then a few weeks later, when he couldn't do that anymore, it was very difficult. I couldn't tell him why. But after about 3 weeks, the state association, his campaign office, the state office, called me one day and they said, Mr. Clinton's going to be in your area, and we'd like to know if he can come by your nursing home and visit. He's going to be visiting many businesses that day. I was thrilled. I was excited. This man that was going to be our governor was coming to my nursing home to look around and see how great it was, because I thought it was great. He came, all of his entourage. So many of the families of all of my residents came in, and we had this box of buttons. Everybody would put on their button, Clinton for governor, and it was an exciting day for us. As soon as he comes in, he gets settled and walking around, introducing himself to people. And the newspaper asked to take a photo. And this is the photo. There was also another resident there, but she was on that other side, and we had to cut her out but for the book. And everybody keeps saying, who is that man in between you and Bill Clinton? He was just one of my residents. His name was Perry Graham. I still remember his name to this day. But the photo op was over, and Mr. Clinton comes over to me, and he starts telling me what a beautiful facility you have, and asking about me personally, about my life. And he's just so charismatic. When you talk to Bill Clinton, either back in those days, I don't think he's much like this anymore, it was as though he never lost eye contact, and it was as though you were the only person in the room. And I thought, my gosh, nursing homes are struggling, and it just sort of went off in the back of my head. I'm going to tell him what a problem we're having, because even though I'm a nurse and I I would always see that my patients got the best that they could. Many nursing homes were struggling. We couldn't get by on the Medicaid reimbursement rate. So I just sort of threw this at him. And he said, "Are you ever in Little Rock?" And I said, "Yes, I'll be there in about 3 weeks." He said, "I want to talk to you about this." And I was thrilled. He said, "Get some figures together for me and let's sit down and talk about this." My gosh, I know I worked for 2 nights straight pulling my invoices and what it costs for me to take care of one resident versus what we were paid by the state and then later on by the Medicare. So on April the 24th, 1978, my nurse and I drive down to Little Rock when we get off work. And we check into the Camelot Hotel. The next morning when we get up, I tell her, I say, "I'm going to call his office to see if we can go over there in our lunch break," because we only had an hour off for lunch. I call and I tell the lady that answers the phone at his campaign office, "Hi, this is Mrs. Hickey." I was Hickey then. I said, "Is Mr. Clinton there?" And she said, "No, Mrs. Hickey, but he said if you ever called to call this number," which I did. It'd only been 3 weeks. So I call the number, he answers the phone, and I explained to him that my nurse and I were there, my director of nursing, and we'd like to come over and see him at noon. I brought the information that we talked about. And he said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to be there today." And I was just so deflated, you know. I didn't tell him that. And he said, almost immediately, he said, "Why don't I come to your hotel right now?" Now, we all know that that's a bad thing now, but I didn't then. And I thought, gosh, this man's going to come to my hotel and meet me down in the coffee shop. He said, "I'll just meet you down in the coffee shop, Camelot Coffee Shop." And he said, "We'll talk down there." So I turned to Norma and I say, "You go on. And as soon as I'm through in the coffee shop, then I'll be right on to the meeting." He said, "Just wait in your room. I'll call you when I get there." He calls. First thing out of his mouth was, "You know, Juanita, it's so crowded down here, and there's even reporters down here. Could we meet in your room?" And I don't care if it's been 40 years. I can remember how I felt when he said that. I'd never been alone with a man I didn't know in a hotel room. I can still remember, but then you think I have important things to talk about, business things to talk about. And he is the Attorney General. You know, it's okay. There's no problem. Well, we all know now, if you know my story or anything, it wasn't okay. Bill Clinton, I had ordered coffee and everything to the room. He shows up at my door, and it's a dimly lit hallway. And he shows up at my door, I open the door, and he's standing outside in very dark sunglasses inside the building. That should have been a tip-off right there. I learned later that he wore dark sunglasses everywhere in Little Rock. I invite him in. I try to talk business and start to pour our coffee. And there's this large table at the end of our little suite. Less the width of that. And he goes around to the other side and he said, "Come over here a minute. I want to show you this building down there." He was talking about an old 1800 jailhouse that he wanted to restore. And I walk over there and I look down at it, and it looks to me like the roof is missing completely. But later on, 20 years later, I described it perfect to the NBC investigators, and they found the old blueprints, and it was exactly like I had said that it was, but it had already been destroyed. I start to go back around the table, and that's when he grabs me. And it shocked me to death. I don't know if I was so naive back then or what. You don't think of registered nurses as being very naive, but apparently I was. And things went worse from there. It was a brutal rape. I get chill bumps now when I even say that, you know, when I say the word rape. And it was brutal. My clothes were torn. My lip was bloodied. Every time I would scream and yell for help, he would bite on my top lip. And I thought he was going to bite my lip off. That's how hard he was bearing down. And it's unforgettable. After the rape was over, I'm sitting up. I go to sit up on the side of the bed. He gets up and straightens himself, and he's looking at me very bewildered. And he looks at me very strangely, and he says, "Don't worry. I had mumps when I was a boy, and I'm sterile." And I thought, my God, what is it? You know, you're thinking, what is he saying? What's going on? What is he saying? And he said that to me, and I thought, oh my God, it just made me cry that much harder. Then I think he notices that my lip was swollen 2 or 3 times the size of a normal lip. And he puts on his sunglasses and he walks to the door. And it was chilling. He said, "You had better put some ice on that," and motioned to my lip and went out the door. And I'm sitting there and I rushed to lock the door because my instincts were, who's going to come in to get rid of the body? Because I mean, that's what I felt like. As a body. And I thought, so I rush over and lock the door, and I go back and lay down, I'd never known anyone that had been raped. I'm a nurse, and I'd never seen anybody in the emergency room or anybody. None of my friends had ever been raped. So this was completely foreign to my way of thinking, completely. And people said, back in '99 when I was interviewed by NBC, they said, "Why didn't you go to the police?" He was the police. He was the Attorney General. Well, why didn't you get a DNA or a rape kit? There was no such thing. There was no such thing. DNA was in its very infancy, so there's no way. But even if there had been, I wouldn't have done it. I was scared to death. But the most important thing that I try to tell other people, and it's a natural thing that you're going to think about, I blamed myself. I thought, how could you have been so stupid and foolish? What were the signs? Why didn't I know? Why didn't I know I was placing myself in that predicament? But I still wouldn't have told. I mean, it was the most embarrassing thing of my life. That, to me, I thought I had allowed this to happen. I know that's not true now. I know what a sexual predator Bill Clinton is and what he's done to other women. He was also the Attorney General. He regulated my nursing homes. All regulatory complaints went to the Attorney General's office. I was already struggling in my business, so that's an area I didn't want to go to at all. But life went on. And people say, how did you manage? How did you do it? The only thing that I can say is I worked myself to death. I became very successful. In 1984 and 85 and 86, my nursing home won the best nursing home in Arkansas. And this was judged by the Office of Long-Term Care. And it was important to me. I did not make the normal, you hear about nursing homes making such huge profits. I wasn't one of those. I made a decent profit, but I didn't make the illegal profit that so many of them were making back then. My patients ate good and they got good care. And that was the most important thing to me. Then in 1987, I bought an old nursing home that was Sparks Manor. It was operated by Sparks Memorial Regional Center in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I developed it for 50 severely handicapped and mentally retarded children. That was my facility that I started in 1987. And I was so excited about this because I had taken care of the elderly for so long, and now here I am with severely handicapped and mentally retarded children. And it was it was a joy for a while. I operated that with my second husband, and then finally turned it over back to him. And if you read my book, you'll understand why. The children were not my thing. These children would never have a life. And I had spent years talking with the elderly that would tell me so many wonderful things about their life and the things that they rejoiced in life. And then you have the children that you get nothing from, nothing. But there are people that were very good at that, and that's who I hired, and I went back to the nursing home. In 1999, I was at a seminar back in Little Rock with the lady who found me that day. And I'm just now remembering, I didn't tell you, about 30 minutes after the rape, Norma Rogers came back to the room looking for me, because I hadn't showed up at the meeting. And she had gone down to the coffee shop. I wasn't there. And then she comes to my room, and I go over. I hear the knocking at the door because I'd had it locked. And I look through the peephole, and it's her. And I think, my God, I forgot about her. I didn't even know she or that seminar existed at that moment in time. So I open the door. She sees me. My lip had even swollen that much more. I had dried blood running down the side of my face. My clothes were all torn, and I looked like something unbelievable. She saw me. She came over and she grabbed me, and we both started crying. Sat down on the end of the bed, told her everything that happened. And we talked for maybe, well, the first thing she did, being a nurse, she went and got ice for my mouth. And we talked. And she finally said, what do you want to do? And I said, I just want to go home. That's all I could think about. I just want to go home. So that's what we did. In 1991, what I started to tell you was I was in Little Rock with Norma, the same one that was with me that day, and her sister, who was my assistant director of nursing. And all of a sudden someone comes to the door and they say, Mrs. Broaddrick is wanted in the hall. So I get up and I go out there, and eventually they follow me out. And the gentleman says, down around that corner by the elevator, so you're needed down there. So I walk down around that corner, and I'm thinking it's an emergency from home. And I walk down around that corner, and as I round it, there stands Bill Clinton. This is 91. There stands Bill Clinton, and behind him, two of his little Arkansas State Police people that watch out for him. And he starts rushing over to me, and I just back up. I mean, I hadn't seen this man in 13 years, and it frightened me, and I didn't want anything to do with him. And he comes over to me and tries to hold my hand, and I still keep backing up. And he said, listen, I'm a changed man. I'm a family man. He said, I would never do anything like that again, and I'm so sorry. And it's just, you know, it's a blur. This is going past my ears, and it's just a blur to me. And I look at him, and I'm starting to cry. And I could kill him. You know, I could absolutely kill him, but there's those two state policemen. And I say, you go to hell. And I walk off. And by the time I get back to my nurses who came with me, they said, what was that all about? What did he want? And I said, he apologized. And we all just sort of laughed at that. And then a week later, he announces he's running for president. Yeah. But, you know, the most frightening thing about that is that he knew where I was at that day, at that hour, and it's like he was saying to me, hey, I can reach out and touch you. So that frightened me. And then, of course, you had Jennifer Flowers come through. You had Kathleen Willett. You had Paula Jones. You know, rumors had circulated for years in Arkansas about me. The 5 people I told within a week, you can imagine it filters out. They'll say, oh, I'm not going to tell anybody, please. I know this is something. And it's going to filter out to all areas of the state. And people are going to say, hey, did you know Juanita Broaddrick was raped by Bill Clinton? I sure thought about coming forward. But I saw how these women were trashed by Hillary and the media. The media was liberal then too. They didn't want to see the Clintons destroyed. And even though I thought about it, I couldn't go there. I was successful. I now had 2 businesses to run, and I couldn't go there. It brought up too many painful memories for me. I just wanted to say, nope, that's not for me. I'm not going there. So I remained silent. And you fast forward about 6 years to 1997, November the 13th, my doorbell's ringing. I go to the door, and it's Rick and Beverly Lambert. They had an investigative firm, and they were there on behalf of Paula Jones. And I go to the door, and really nice looking couple. In fact, they are the parents of Miranda Lambert.
No.
Yeah. I communicated with them years after that, but she was just a little girl at the time. And they were very courteous and very nice, but I made it extremely clear to them, even if you Google Rick Beverly Lambert, Juanita Broaddrick, it'll come up what was said that day, because I had no idea they recorded me. They never told me they were recording me, and they had a recorder hooked to them so they could record everything I said, which is, don't come to me. I'm not coming forward to help Paula Jones. I've been through this. I am not going to come forward in any certain terms. That's too painful for me. Please do not do that to me. And they were very courteous and nice, and then they left. So I thought, okay, I had my say. 5 weeks later, I was subpoenaed to be Jane Doe number 5 in the Paula Jones suit. I was pissed. I thought, I told them how painful this was to me and that I didn't want to relive that. And I was pissed. So I thought, I'll show you. Went right to that deposition, and I said, no, nothing happened. I'm not going to help her. That's what I was saying in the back of my mind. And I said, no, I don't know. I do not know what they're talking about. Nothing like that ever happened to me. And when I left there, I felt victorious, until I find out a few weeks later, they take the recording and they send it to Ken Starr. Yeah, during the impeachment. And my son, who's an attorney now.
Good for him.
Yeah. Works for children's rights every day. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. He called me and said, because all the information had come to him from our attorney, and he says, Mom, I need to come talk to you. And I'll never forget us sitting in the kitchen at my home, and he comes over and he said, we need to talk. We got a letter from Ken Starr, and you're going to be deposed, and we need to think about this. He said, Paula Jones was a civil suit. This is federal, this is serious. This is grand jury, this is all of it, Mom. And he says, I know you don't want to tell, but you have to. And so that's what I did. They gave me immunity for the first deposition with Paula Jones.
Immunity from what?
From lying in Paula Jones. They had so much evidence. And even though Ken Starr's attorneys and the people that interviewed me that day, they couldn't have been kinder to me. And people say, well, Ken Starr didn't believe her. That's all you need to know is Ken Starr. Ken Starr did believe me, and he even said that in his book tour here about a year, whenever he was gone. And he said, and it's just like I'm going to tell you now, I had nothing to do with obstruction of justice. I had never been paid off by the Clintons. No one had made me not come forward. I did that on my own. I did not want into all this nasty mess. So that was strictly mine. Okay, now we've arrived. After the Ken Starr thing came out, everybody knew who Jane Doe number 5 was. I had been talking with Lisa Myers for approximately, Lisa Myers with NBC, for about a year about doing an interview. And finally she calls me one day and she said, okay, everybody knows who you are. And they're going to start spinning their stories their own way. However they want to spin it, whether they like you, whether they don't like you, that's how their story is going to be played out. She said, you need to come on and do it yourself. So that was what convinced me to do the Dateline. On January the 20th, 1999, Lisa Myers and all her crew come to my home in Van Buren and record for about 6 to 7 hours. It was devastating. It was so hard to sit there and tell about my life and what had happened to me, but I did it. At the time they recorded, they said, this will be aired on January the 29th, on a Friday, on our regular Dateline. Of course it didn't. No, it didn't air. Too many of the higher-ups. So here comes the 28th of January, and Lisa's calling me, and she said, well, we have a little problem. And I said, what is it? And she says, well, there's good news and there's bad news. And I said, okay. And she said, the good news is you're credible. And I said, oh, Lord, here it comes. And she said, the bad news is you're very credible. And I'd never been interviewed. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I do now. Should have then. Andy Lack did not want he was personal friends with Bill Clinton. Tim Russert fought for it to be aired. And at that time, Drudge comes out with a big, y'all remember Matt Drudge? He was about our only way to get information, back then. Matt Drudge comes out with the headlines about me and then says, NBC stalls, won't run the most important interview about the impeachment of all time. And he also says down under there that the scuttlebutt is, in the NBC break room, is that Tom Brokaw says he will resign if my story is aired. I thought that was just... Yeah, I wish he had too. Yeah. So they finally aired it, but after we knew pretty well that it may never air. It aired 12 or 13 days after the impeachment vote. Convenient for NBC, so they wouldn't be the one that removed Bill Clinton from office. And opposite the Grammys. Yeah, so it was. That's how they wanted it. That brings us to today. If any of you have been watching the news on ABC and you watched the other night when Ronan Farrow says that Juanita Broaddrick her case against Bill Clinton is extremely credible and should be investigated. So 20 years later, we're back in it again. And all I can do is hope that sometime that this is going to come to a better result this time, but no one really knows what's going to happen. I've always said the Clintons are Teflon. Ronan had called me a couple of months ago before his book came out, and we talked about it at length, and I'm still working with him, so we'll just have to see. It's just still a developing story. After that Dateline debacle, I went back in the woodwork. I went back to my business. I went back to my family. I went back to doing all the things I love to do. And I was happy. Continued to run my business. My son graduated in '94 from law school. And then in 2008, I sold my facilities. I had run them for 33 years and run them very successfully. And I thought, I'm tired. I want to travel. I want to be on the tennis court more. So that's what I did. So I just had a good life. Now we arrive at December 2015. You know what happened then? Hillary Clinton tweeted. All victims of sexual abuse have the right to be heard and believed. We're with you. She did that little hand motion. We're with you. Is that the most disgusting thing you ever heard come out of a woman who harassed and threatened other women? And I looked at that, and you have the DVR thing, and I thought, what did she say? What was that? And so I punched the rewind button, and I played it back, and I thought, my God, she did say it. And we learned later that she did that on her own, that her campaign was furious that somebody had let her tweet that. And so I thought, oh my God in heaven, help me. What do I do? Well, I did, but before I was on very much social media, I did what all grandparents do when you want to know social media. I called my 12-year-old grandson. And he came over to my house and said, okay, Nana, well, I had joined Twitter 2 or 3 years before, but I didn't know how to tweet. Because I think one of my first tweets was, I'm on the porch having coffee. So and I thought, that's no fun. That's no fun at all. So anyway, he comes over and shows me what to do. The next morning on January the 6th, 2016, I'm sitting there on my phone, and I'm typing this all out so that, remember the red letters that used to come up, that they didn't come out, and I thought, okay, I haven't said anything new. I haven't said anything that I didn't say 20 years ago. This all looks good. Tweet. I tweeted I was 35 years old when Bill Clinton, the Arkansas Attorney General, raped me, and Hillary tried to silence me. I'm now 73, and it never goes away. So when I hit tweet, I thought, I'll show you. I was just answering her. All hell broke loose. I had been silent for 15 years, and this was unknown to me. Had my phone ringing off back then, but this was unknown. The third person to call me was my son. Because the law office phone started ringing too. And he said, Mother, what did you do? I said, I have no idea. I didn't think about Twitter being worldwide and instant. My God, if I just had it in 78, wouldn't that have been, that would have been great.
You'd probably ended up dead.
Yeah, probably so. So this signaled to the world, and my God, I got replies from England to Germany to Australia. I couldn't believe it. Where are these people coming from? I couldn't believe it. So it just signaled, hey, I'm back in the game, and I'm not going to let her say things like that. As soon as my tweet went viral, she removed "You Should Be Believed" from her website. And that came out in the news back then too. So here I was, feet firmly planted in fighting. But in the beginning, I was only fighting Hillary and Bill Clinton. I didn't know much about Mr. Trump. I wasn't a huge Trump supporter. And then I read James Wood's tweet that made so much sense to me. He said, Trump may be vinegar, but Hillary is arsenic. And I thought, yes, that's perfect. So I got to liking him more and more, and liking what he had to say, and was just so thrilled about his candidacy. Then all of a sudden in May of 2000, oh, thank you. No, in May, if I got somebody, of 2000, no, I got it. In 2016, that's when the big Article came out in the New York Times front page, all these women that were sexually harassed or assaulted by Mr. Trump. And what was it, 4 of them, almost as soon as it came out, said, I didn't say that. You know, that's the New York Times. So here's Hannity, and he's saying to President Trump, candidate Trump at the time, and he's saying, well, they've come out about all these things about you. What about Bill Clinton? Are they going to come out about exposure, about sexual assault, about, and Sean didn't even have time to finish it until Mr. Trump said, and rape? My God, I could have fallen out of my chair. I thought, he said that word. My God, I couldn't believe. It's a word that I had steered clear from. I would say sexual assault. When you say the name, when you say the word rape, it was just heartbreaking to me, and it was too descriptive. But after he said it that day, I thought, that's the word. That's the only word that will describe what a woman goes through when something like that happens. So, I'll get there just a minute. I get ahead and get excited. What followed after that was just numerous interviews on Hannity, on Martha McCallum, and on all those nighttime people. Laura. Yeah, many times I'd go into New York or D.C. to be interviewed, or they'd come to my home. I loved it when they came to my home and set up the cameras. And I even was interviewed by Jake Tapper. All he wanted to know was about the women that were on the front of the New York Times and what I thought about that. And I said, I have no idea. I only know what happened to me in that hotel room in 1978. You'll have to go ask them. I don't know. And then Essie Cupp. Then on October 7th and 8th, am I running too long? Okay. On October 7th and 8th, I did an in-depth interview in Washington, D.C. at the old Watergate. I thought that was really cool that we could do this interview over there. I'd never been to the old Watergate. It was with Paula Jones and Kathleen Willey and myself. We did separate interviews and we did joint interviews, talking about how our cases had always been overlooked, except for Paula Jones. She did get a settlement on hers. But how that the campaign was not looking to this woman who had enabled her husband and who had harassed and all the women that were his victims. So we were talking a lot about that. And it was a very difficult one to complete, because I had to go back through everything again, and I hadn't done that in a long time. It was all over with, and on October the 8th, about 5 o'clock, I was on a plane going back home to Arkansas after this big interview. And I get a phone call from Steve Bannon's people, and they're saying, we'd like to have you at the St. Louis debate tomorrow night. And I said, I'm on my way to Arkansas. And they said, well, we'll make all the arrangements. And I thought, well, let me call you when I get to Dallas. I have a layover there. And I thought about it on the way, and I thought, sure I will. I called my son, and my son said, Mom, did you hear about that horrible Hollywood Access tape? And I said, yes. I also heard his explanation, and I believe him, that it's locker room talk. I just didn't give a lot of credence to that tape. It was disturbing. People shouldn't say words like that, but men are going to say words like that. Women are going to say words like that, you know. Nobody's immune to that kind of talk. And so he said, oh, I just don't think you ought to go. And I said, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree, because this man has asked me to come to the most public forum, and we have been neglected for so long. Yes, I'm going to go. So the campaign told me, they said, go very incognito. Don't let anybody know that you're going to be there. So I wore my ball cap, wore my sunglasses, and they said, look for this driver out there, and he'll have a sign, he'll hold it up, and it says Jane Morgan. So I walk over to this guy with his little cap and all of his suit and stuff, and I say, hi, I'm Jane Morgan. He said, sure you are, let's go. Yeah. And so they kept us hidden the whole day. It was just absolutely remarkable. When we get to the hotel area, it was several buildings outside St. Louis that this hotel was. I don't even remember what it was. But they made us stay in the car, made me stay in the car with all these real dark windows until there was a person standing here and a person there and then another person where you go into the building, that the coast was clear because there were so many reporters staying there too. And I had no idea that they were really keeping this that private, but they did. About 5 o'clock, we go to meet President Trump. And we go to his hotel, same thing. We go up the service elevator where no one can see us. And we get upstairs to a nice room like this and meet him. So genuine. He has got to be, he was so kind to us, thanked us over and over for coming. And then we've all talked, we've taken our pictures, we're so excited to go to the debate. Then Steve Bannon comes and he says, let's go through this door right here. So I think we're leaving and going back down the service elevator, and we walk in, and here's a table with 5 chairs behind it. And I turned to Kathleen, this is how silly I felt. I turned to Kathleen and I said, are we going to eat? Had no idea that we were going to a press conference. None of us did. We were never told. And that's probably good. It probably would have scared me to death had I known I was going to be going in there and asked to say something. So we get in there, and then Mr. Trump comes and sits beside me on my left and between Kathy Shelton and I. And he comes and sits down, sort of acknowledges all of us and says, let them in. So they open these double doors, and here comes all these cameras. All these, there's probably 20 or 25 or 30 cameras coming in the door. They all get in the door and they see us and they just stop. Like a deer in the headlights, they just stop. And we're looking back at them the same way. Who are you people? And so then he says, these nice ladies have something they'd like to say to you. And I thought, say to you? So I'm thinking about a tweet that I had done that day, which talks about actions speak louder than words. He had retweeted it the day before, so that's where we went. We all had to think up something real quick. And then we go to the debate. After we get over that shock, we're ushered on to the debate. When Kathleen Willey and I first walk into the debate, when Kathleen Willey and I first walk into the debate, that picture, we walked past Bill Clinton, and that picture that you see with his eyes all bugged out, that happened then. And it was tremendous. It was a tremendous experience. I support and work for him every day. I do everything I can to get other people to support our president. I think he's wonderful. But if you'll remember, when Stormy Daniels' thing came up, I'm a big Twitter person. I'm on Twitter 5 to 6 hours a day. I love it. Yeah, I troll Hillary, I troll Bill, I troll any big Democrat. I love doing it. Last year, when all the Stormy Daniels things was going on, I tweeted, we did not elect President Trump to be our spiritual advisor, our priest, or our pastor. I will continue to strenuously support him unless I find out he slept with Hillary. Thank you. I'm going to go back here and... Which one's yours? This one's yours.
Was that awesome? I mean, my gosh. You are a hoot man. We are blessed to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
for your courage.
Thank you.
It's amazing. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.